depending how we are feeling. But don't worry about that. We will stop the recording at the end for the Q&A and feedback session. So, alrighty. I will start to, hang on, someone else has just entered the waiting room. There we go. Got a nice number of you tonight, actually. Super. So let's get going. All right. So AAC, Guide for Early Years Professionals. Firstly, as usual, and apologies if you hear this every time, housekeeping rules for Zoom. Cameras on or off, I don't mind. I see that pretty much everybody has opted to have their camera off, and that's absolutely fine. It's the evening. We want to just be in our pajamas, don't we? Chilling out on Zoom. But do please keep yourself on mute all the time unless you're contributing to the Q&A session at the end. If you do have any questions, do feel free to type them into the chat box as we go. I won't review them, but I will have a look at them at the end. If you're anything like me, you'll probably get to the end of the presentation and forget what you wanted to ask. So please do pop it in the chat box live as you think about it if you want, and we can have a look at the end. Do come and go as you need. We've probably got children at home, pets at home, cups of tea on the go, and that's absolutely fine. Slides will be emailed to you. Damon has them already. So as long as you fill out your feedback form at the end, which includes your email address, that is your key to getting the slides sent to you afterwards. Okay, as you probably all know by now, these webinars are being hosted by our Reach Out Stronger Practice Hub team, which is run by Damon, Victoria, Jess, and Lisa. Tonight we have Damon and Lisa joining us, so thank you to them for giving up their time too. And again, as you probably know by now, Stronger Practice Hubs have been commissioned by the Department for Education to improve outcomes of children locally across the early years foundation stage. It's part of the COVID-19 early years education recovery process. And there are 18 Stronger Practice Hubs across the UK. So this one is based at the Barn Nursery School in Grinster Green. And these are the people who are kind of providing all of this lovely extra support alongside your kind of in-person support from the hub and the real people behind it. If you're ever looking for kind of out of hours support with thinking about the current evidence base, you can go to the early years evidence store, and that has got a wealth of information about the current evidence that is being used in early years practice. So if you're a new practitioner and you kind of are at the start of your journey, there's a lot of evidence there. But also for us longer practicing clinicians in whatever field we're in, sometimes you can get a bit used to because with how it's always been done. So it's really useful to go and check that what you're doing is still supported by current evidence. The Stronger Practice Hub can also offer bespoke support. So if you go onto their website or their socials and think, yeah, that's not quite what I'm looking for, do get in touch because, you know, it's not a one size fits all approach, is it? Different settings have different needs and different children and different profiles. So do please get in touch with them, and I'm sure they'll be able to provide you with something that's actually, you know, really beneficial to your setting. Okay, here are the QR codes to follow us on all your different platforms. And without further ado, let's start thinking about AAC. So what is AAC? So this is a really kind of speech and languagey term that I want to kind of demystify and debulk a little bit for you tonight. So AAC, just letting someone else into the waiting room. AAC stands for Alternative and Augmentative Communication. Now, I don't know about you, but I look at that and I think, what does that even mean? That doesn't really tell me an awful lot about anything. So where do we start unpacking what this term alternative and augmentative communication means? So a really, really nice slide here from assistiveware.com, who make a lot of AAC devices, is AAC are the tools or technology that help people communicate if they can't rely on speaking. And that's what it boils down to. It basically means that people can say anything to anyone, anywhere, and anytime. It doesn't stop or prevent someone from speaking. And this is a really common parental fear that I'm going to address later. We're going to do a little section on addressing parent fears when you mention incorporating some AAC into your practice. So let's bed down into that a little bit more and think about, again, what this really means. So AAC is a range of strategies and tools to help people who struggle with speech. It could be a simple letter or a picture board, or it could be your sophisticated computer-based systems. But basically, what AAC does is it helps someone to communicate as effectively as they can in as many situations as possible. Now, AAC is a really, really broad term and it describes lots and lots of methods of communication to get around problems with ordinary speech. And I think that's a really nice way of putting it. It helps us to get around the problems that we might have with speaking. And actually, some kinds of AAC are actually part of how we communicate anyway. So whenever we say goodbye, we often wave. That's a kind of AAC. It supports our message. We might give a thumbs up instead of speaking. You might point to a picture. You might gesture if you're in a foreign country. And I think actually that's a really good one to think about. If you're in a foreign country and you don't speak the language, you therefore have, I guess, a problem with ordinary speech in this context. So what strategies would you use to get around that? You would use pointing at pictures, you would use some gesturing, all of those things to help supplement when speaking isn't an option. Again, think about if you've lost your voice. How would you communicate with someone if you temporarily lost your voice? Again, you might point at things, you might gesture at stuff, you might jot it down. You might use an iPad, anything like that. So ASC is basically, if I can't talk, how will I communicate with you? So already it's starting to feel a lot less scary than the title Augmentative and Alternative Communication. So who might use AAC then? So AAC can be used by children or adults and adults with a speech sound difficulty. So if you have a child with significant verbal dyspraxia whose speech is unintelligible and it's going to be a very long journey to get that remediated, you may give them some AAC in the meantime. Children or adults with learning difficulties, perhaps with physical difficulties where we can't move the muscles of our mouths correctly, such as somebody maybe with cerebral palsy. Autistic children or adults may use AAC, and even people who have a brain injury as a result of an accident or illness. So anybody who has some kind of impairment with their production of speech may use AAC, or with their production of expressive language. So why might we use it? Now, I was going to type out a slide on this, but actually Oxford NHS did this beautifully and I didn't need to. So you know what I'm like for not reinventing the wheel. So we've thought about who might use AAC, but let's think about the whys. So we might use AAC as a bridge or a stopgap. Very often, if you use AAC in a particular way, it will springboard a child into spoken language. And again, I'll talk about that in a bit when we think about parent fears. It may help the child make sense of spoken language, so it may also help their understanding. We can use it as a supplement of their spoken skills to be used alongside speech. So we're not discouraging children from trying to speak or use their voice, but the AAC can help to remove some of that potential frustration or potential communication breakdown. Now, it may be used as an alternative to their to spoken language because of the nature of their difficulties. So some children are going to always struggle with spoken communication. So in that case, AAC gives them a voice. And with the voice comes some control over their environment. At that point where a child can use AAC successfully, they're able to advocate, they're able to make their needs known, they're able to report back on how they're feeling. And I just think that's a basic human need, isn't it? And a basic human right. AAC can also be used as a tool to develop language skills. So it can give the child the experience of building their language skills. So even if a child can only produce sounds or single words or vocalizations, actually, if you can use an AAC device where you build sentences with symbols, you're actually developing language skills in the absence of being able to speak it. So the benefits of AAC then. So AAC has been shown to reduce frustration for children and young people with communication difficulties and increase participation in life at home and at school. And I think that stands to reason. I think how frustrating is it if we lose our voice or can't communicate with people for a day or two? Actually, you become frustrated and you often think, do you know what, I'm just not going to bother because people aren't going to be able to understand me anyway. So actually we withdraw, don't we? If we're struggling to communicate for whatever reason, we just think, well, there's no incentive for me to do so. And actually, children who cannot communicate very often will withdraw because actually they're either met with a blank face because they're not understood or just kind of ignored, really. So communication, we know, is all about people exchanging messages. We know that we're giving and receiving messages as part of communication, and having a reliable and effective way of doing that, whether it's speech, whether it's AAC, in whatever guise, improves quality of life, brings more opportunities for education, work, relationships, and independence. And I think all of this stands to reason. It's just a case of not being scared of AAC. So I wanted to think a little bit more about why we communicate. What drives us to communicate? What different reasons do we communicate? So first and foremost, we communicate to request. If we want something, we communicate our need. If we're hungry, we ask for food. If we're bored, we ask for something to do. If we're feeling poorly, we tell somebody that we ask for some medicine. We also like to comment. We like people to be interested in the stuff that we're interested in. If we see something interesting, we want to tell our friend about it. And we go, oh, look at that. That's really interesting. Protesting. I think this is probably even more important than commenting. If we do not like what is happening to us or at us, then we need to be able to protest that and make it stop. It's a very basic sense of advocacy. We enjoy sharing news. So I was talking to Damon just before we logged on about some exciting news that's happened in my life, and it brought me joy to exchange that message with him. So we like to, as human beings, share our news, share things that have happened, good and bad. And it's just part of what is good for our quality of life and our mental health. I think when we get a bit of good news, what do? The first thing we do is pick up the phone and either ring someone or text someone or pop it on Facebook or Instagram, isn't it? We enjoy sharing news. We like to start conversations. Again, it's a way of reaching out. It's a way of forming communication bonds with people. We like to direct people, don't we? We like to direct, do it this way, don't do it that way. Oh, that's really important as well. And asking questions and giving opinions. So these are all the different reasons that we may want to come out of ourselves and communicate something to somebody else. And essentially with AAC, we're just thinking of other ways to communicate. So now we've talked about what AAC is, and hopefully that's nice and clear. I want to start thinking about the different types of AAC and what you might see in an early years setting, because some are going to be more common than others. We split AAC into three main categories. We have no tech, low tech, and high-tech AAC. So for no-tech AAC, as the name suggests, these are things that do not require anything else, okay? We don't need any extra equipment or anything extra. We have it all on us already. So examples of no-tech AAC are gesture, facial expression, sign language, and that could be Makaton, BSL, Paget Gorman, anything, any kind of sign system, body language, vocalizations, by which I don't mean necessarily words, but they could be, but even just vocalizations like ah or oh, anything like that, and pointing. So these are all things that we can just do within ourselves. These are all ways that we can manipulate our body to help supplement and augment the communication skills that we already have. Low tech AAC is one step up from that. We need something else, but it's not incredibly complex. So this may be something like a picture board that you can point to communicate what you want. It may be writing. So again, you're not going to see that necessarily in your early year settings, but it's good to be aware of. Photo books. Now, I have used these as low-tech AAC with kiddos in early years. These are really key. If you've got a child who, wants to advocate, they want their mummy or their daddy, then having a photo of mummy or daddy that they can point to is really, really important. A communication book, and then objects of reference. Now, for those of you who don't know, an object of reference is a physical object that signifies the thing or the activity that a child wants to do. So you may have an object of reference as like a wooden spoon for baking. You may have a ball if they want to go out and play football. You may have a set of dummy car keys for a child to give to you if they want to go out for a car ride. It's an object that represents the activity or represents the thing. Now, high-tech AAC is, what it says it is really. So these are when we start to get onto things like speech generating devices. Now, the very easiest of these is like a recordable button. And I am about to start working with a child who I spoke to the mum the other day, and she said, yep, I've got recorded buttons all over the house that the child can just press, and it will say a recorded message. Now, it could be something as basic as hello, or it could be I'm feeling hungry, or it could be I'm feeling thirsty, or I need to go to bed, or I want to go out. But they are pre-recorded buttons that a child can hit, and a message will be played. But obviously they're limited by the fact that there's one message per button. But still, in the very early use of AAC, they can be very, very helpful. Then we're going on to the really complex stuff. So you do have speech generating devices that are, in their own right, or you may have an iPad that has an app which generates speech. Now, you can see here the graph of kind of where we go from low tech sort of. So they've put low tech with these buttons in low tech. I think it could be sort of, either or really. But right in that high tech, we're looking at those eye gaze devices, text to speech devices. So I mean, everybody thinks Professor Stephen Hawking, don't they, when they think about the eye gaze devices, where users can just use their eye gaze to manipulate the machine. So these are real high tech devices. And obviously you're not going to be seeing them in your setting, but it's really useful to kind of be aware of the variety of AAC that's out there. So I guess this is your real important slide here. What is AAC likely to look like in an early years foundation stage setting? The picture I've put here is exactly what you're not going to be seeing in your early years foundation setting. Your setting is not going to look like this. This will be a very specialist setting. I would not imagine that, a typical child minding setting would be having, a group of children sitting around a table with their AAC devices. What you're going to probably see is a significant use of pictures and visuals. And I've put here that these can be used bi-directionally. So they can be used to aid understanding. You can be using them to reference what things are, but also for a child to point to or give to you to make a request. Okay. Gestures are going to be absolutely everywhere, I should have thought, in an early years setting, because we're using them naturally to augment our communication. A good communicator will probably go, who wants a drink? Who wants a drink? It's just something that we do when we've got our communication head on. Makaton, very, very likely. I know a lot of you have been to the speech and language conferences and done some sort of introduction to Makaton. That is basically another form of AAC. So this is what I mean. It's probably things that you're doing or considering doing anyway. Communication books, visual timetables. Again, we are augmenting what is already there. Anything more complex than this, such as PECs, an iPad, or a speech generation, I can't say that, can I? Speech generating device, you are very, very likely to be supported by a specialist speech and language therapist. If they've got as far as needing a speech generation, that's it, I couldn't do it again, could I? Speech generating device. This child will be under the care of speech and language therapy. So you will need to be liaising with them. It's very unlikely you'll see it, but it's possible. It's possible. But aren't small children too young for AAC? This is a question that we're very often asked. So I thought I'd dig out some research. So ASHA are the American Speech and Hearing Association. They are the American equivalent to the Royal College of Speech and Language Therapists over here. So they're really, really credible. And they have an article showing research that children with communication challenges do best when introduced to AAC as early as 12 months. So what we're doing, again, is we're supporting, we're identifying that problem, we're augmenting, we're giving them an alternative, we're giving them a voice, and actually the benefits of that are paying off even when they're little. Early intervention and AAC, what a difference 30 years makes. So if we have a look down the bottom, so these reports provide substantial support that early AAC intervention enhances a child's communication and language development from single sign and symbol vocabulary increases for children 3 years old and under to multi-symbol utterances and grammatical development for preschoolers. So again, it's showing us that actually AAC does not prevent a child from talking. Actually, it develops vocabulary and it also develops grammar in your slightly older young people, so preschoolers. And here, evidence-based communication assessment and intervention. This one, which was published actually in August 24, so it's so recent. Systematic review supports that it's never too early to implement AAC intervention for children under 6 years of age. So if somebody says to you, aren't children in your setting too little to be using AAC, you can actually say, nope, the evidence there is very, very sound that it is actually a very good thing to do. I've got here a do's and don'ts of AAC. Again, from Assistiveware, who are really key people in producing AAC devices. I'm not going to run through the whole thing, but I just wanted to point you in the direction of a few things. Aim high. Okay, so it used to be that we demanded prerequisite skills. A child must be able to do this before you introduce AAC. No, not anymore. Actually, you just get on and do it because you're not going to do any harm by doing it. All that you can do is benefit. So we just get on with it rather than waiting. Make sure AAC is available all day, every day. Now, something I did take from my PECS training is that a child who does use PECS, they have a PECS book, or let's say an iPad or anything else like that. This is that child's voice. This is how that child communicates. Now, you wouldn't dream of taping up a child's mouth so they couldn't talk. So why on earth would you think about only letting them have their AAC at some parts of the day? If a child is using a communication board or any form of AAC that has low tech or above, if they need to be able to access that, it must be at a place where that child can access it whenever they need to. And actually, that is my very first goal with anybody working with any low tech or above AAC, is to teach the child where they can find it. Before you do anything else, teach them to know that your book, iPad, whatever it is that you're using, will always be found here. It needs to be low level where the child can reach it, and it must always be accessible. You would never take a child's voice away. Why would you take their AAC away? Allow exploration and access to the whole vocabulary. Now, a downside to some of these AAC methods is that they're quite restrictive on vocabulary. And again, as we know, good vocabulary is an indicator of better outcomes at the end of school. So we need to get maximising the vocabulary where we are. And, whenever we're using AAC, again, this may be slightly out of your scope of practice, but you need to be getting help from speech and language therapy if you've got a child who's really going to need AAC and need to use it well and consistently. The other thing is to provide wait time. Very often we don't give children enough time to kind of just work out what they need to do, and we just talk and talk and talk and talk and talk. We need to give children plenty of time to be able to go through the motions of what they need to do. If they need to point to a picture, if they need to give you a picture, if they need to select it and give it to you, if they need time to type on an iPad or generate a sign, we need to give them ample time to do that. Parental fears. Now, very often with AAC, the most terrifying thing, even as a speech and language therapist of 20 years, is addressing it with a child's parents, because very often you may hear, "Won't it stop them from talking? I don't want them to sign. I want them to speak. It might make them look different to their friends. I'm not going to be able to do this at home. I haven't got the time. I haven't got time to do this at home. I'm very busy. I've got other children. There's nothing wrong with my child. Why are you suggesting this?" And these are very, very common responses. So I just wanted to put this useful slide in that you may well be able to use with some parents if you get those responses. So debunking common AAC misconceptions. So the big one people are scared of is that AAC is going to prevent verbal speech from developing. That's not the case, because whenever, for example, a child gives you a picture of what they want, you give them the word back. If a child gives me a picture of bubbles or a photo of bubbles, I go, "Oh, bubbles, you want some bubbles. Let's get the bubbles." So actually you're exposing them to that spoken language. And eventually, many children, not all, but many will start to realize that bubbles matches that picture or that symbol, which matches the outcome. They get their bubbles, and then they eventually realize that the word bubbles, you can cut the middleman and get rid of the symbol. Lo and behold, we're starting to think about spoken language. Again, we've talked about preschoolers and toddlers being too young for AAC. Some children are too impaired to use AAC. They're too severely impaired. I don't like the word impaired anyway, but it does get used. And we have seen the research says that anyone from any age can benefit from AAC. If a child can speak a little, they don't need AAC. No, again, we know that we are augmenting their communication. We're not taking it away what they can already do. We're just giving them an alternative or a little bit extra to get around what they've got. AAC will fix all communication difficulties. It's not that simple. If your child needs AAC, there will be some conversations to be had, but we know that AAC will benefit them. Low-tech solutions like picture books are the first step. There's no first step or prerequisite. You can go straight into a speech generating device if you want to. Very often what holds people back is very often finances and actually fear of not knowing how to use it. Children need to be able to match or identify pictures before getting AAC. Again, no, they don't need any prerequisite. There are cognitive and behavioural prerequisites. Again, and now they're shouting it, no prerequisites for children. Once someone gets AAC, they'll have to use it forever. Absolutely not. I have had children who have outgrown their AAC and become verbal communicators. Again, we can very often use it successfully as a springboard into spoken language. Often AAC is seen as a last resort, that they're not making progress in speech therapy. And there is a kind of perception that AAC, if you had got an AAC device, you've had a rubbish speech therapist and they've failed. And actually, AAC is giving a child, it gives a child a voice. So actually, it's really important for young children to have some vehicle to communicate. It's not a failure. It's actually, a really strong decision. AAC are devices are only for children with intact cognition. So anyone can benefit from AAC. People who have had head injuries or brain injuries, they use AAC very successfully. And AAC makes children look abnormal. No, a child is at greater risk of being, judged by other people if they can't communicate at all. And actually, there's been no better time really to use a speech generating device because most children have iPads or tablets or phones in their hands a lot of the time. Actually, you blend in more beautifully now than you ever have before. So your take-home messages here are AAC is nothing to be scared of. You're probably doing a lot of it without even knowing. It can't do any harm. Worst case scenario, you're going to do nothing. But best case scenario, you're going to really make a massive impact. You will not do any harm. And actually, parent views are often one of the most challenging hurdles to implementing AAC. Actually doing it often isn't the difficult bit, it's getting parents on board. You're likely to see in early year settings no or low tech AAC. High tech AAC is unusual and it will be overseen by a specialist SALT. If you think a child needs AAC, it's very likely that they're going to benefit from a SALT referral. So if you've looked at any of these and gone, oh yeah, so and so in my setting might need this, then actually you need to be filling out a SALT referral because it's likely that something's got you thinking that they benefit from that. So something is, possibly awry with their communication. Always seek advice if you're unsure. That stands to reason. So use your local NHS speech language therapy service. Reach me through the hub. So coming up next, the next webinar will be in the new year. We're going to have Christmas first and all have a rest. And then I've been asked by some people at the last speech and language conference if I could talk about ADHD in early years. So that's kind of not necessarily speech and language per se, but is still something that's very important to be on the lookout for. And as an ADHD mum, I think I can come at it from two separate viewpoints. So please join us on the 8th of January. If you can't make the 8th, come along on the 14th, where I will have been a whole day's autism training. So I'm going to be neurodiversity buzzing that day. Come and join us and find out a bit more about ADHD, how it differs in girls and boys,